was going to wait to do this video until later, but I watched at a press conference that was given by President Trump and President Zelensky of Ukraine. And it was really disturbing. It was fine for probably the first 50 minutes, and then in the last 10 minutes it really devolved with the help of Vice President Vance. And for most of the press conference, only Trump and Zelensky were in the camera. And Zelensky was in his typical, basically like military fatigues or whatever you would call it, that he's worn throughout the entire war. And then I assumed it was a reporter. Like, I didn't recognize the voice because it came from off camera. And this voice starts talking to Zelensky in a demeaning tone, saying, "Don't you own any suits? Why are you always dressed like this? Why don't you wear a suit?" And I was like, wow, that reporter's a real buffoon. And then the press conference continues, and then JD Vance comes into the camera. The camera pans back, and because Vance was, I think Trump turned it over to Vance at some point to talk about something that he had said. And Vance started talking, and then Zelensky was talking about his relationship with Putin and things that had gone on between Ukraine and Russia. And Vance didn't like the things that Zelensky was saying, so he basically started to talk down to the president of Ukraine and essentially telling him to shut up and that he should be grateful for the U.S.'s assistance, which may be true. And the first thing he said was, don't try to prosecute this situation in the press. Let's talk about it behind closed doors, which I probably also agree with, but just his tone. And then I realized, it hit me like, oh, that guy who I thought was just an ignorant journalist was the vice president of our country. That was like, wow, that's crazy. And his tone was absolutely inappropriate. And then Trump started piggybacking off of Vance, and they basically both like teamed up to verbally beat up on Zelensky for like a good period of time. And it was embarrassing and it was shameful. And to his credit, Zelensky kept his composure. It was really impressive. And I'm ashamed of the president of my country. I'm ashamed of the vice president of my country. I'm more ashamed of the vice president. I mean, the president, he talked down to Zelensky as well, but he's the president. At least it was president to president. JD Vance is not the head of state. He was talking to another head of state, and he was completely out of line. Not to mention, he was talking to somebody older than him. And he was talking to somebody who's living through a war. So it was really embarrassing. And I noticed after I listened to that I was exhausted. And I think it's because it really affected me, because I have a lot of optimism for our new administration. And the way that these guys behaved really sent me sideways. So I'm observing myself reacting that way, and we'll see what happens going forward. I've been listening to people around me say negative things about Trump and Vance, and I've been, kind of holding my posture as, look, I'm optimistic for what they're doing, and we'll see what happens. And this was not a good data point. I mean, it was a meaningful data point, but it was not a positive data point. And so I'm really disappointed in them. Now, they may have had reason to behave the way they did. Apparently they're very frustrated with Zelensky, and maybe there are things that have happened behind closed doors that kind of add to that. And certainly Trump has staked a lot of his credibility on being able to get this war settled. And Zelensky was on camera, on national or international news, accusing Russia of having many times violated ceasefires in the past, prior to this war. So I'm sure that Trump and Vance didn't like the fact that he brought that out on television. But Vance's tone towards the head of state of another country was just, it was appalling. So I don't know if these guys are capable of learning from their mistakes, and if they have any humility. But I hope that they can see their own behavior and say to themselves, okay, I don't need to be doing that. I'm representing the U.S. people, and we don't need to be seen as tasteless and rude and disrespectful. And maybe they don't think that they acted that way. So we shall see.